Well, with Oktoberfest underway, those in Germany are expected to drink over 2 million gallons of beer. 2 million, and brewers are determined to keep it flowing. They're teaming up with researchers to save the suds from the effects of climate change. Tina Kraus has our story.
The centuries-old Oktoberfest tradition runs deep in Germany, and keeping a cold one in everyone's hand is what the world's biggest beer festival is all about. But brewing a cold beer on a warm planet is becoming a challenge, so researchers in Munich are busy breeding special hops. Plants with deeper roots that need less water, making them more resistant to rising temperatures, drought, and disease.
We grew up here more than 7,000 seedlings every year. They are selected out of more than 100,000 small seedlings.
Scientists call this nursery their kindergarten, where they're aiming to grow plants over 20 feet tall into stronger and more climate-resistant hops for generations to come. They're teaming up with brewers, farmers, and students to spread the word.
The new varieties gives our farmers the chance to have an income and gives our brewer the varieties that they need now and in the future.
Researchers hope the specially bred hops will one day be brewed into beers served around the world, including those at Oktoberfest, helping to keep the industry afloat. Tina Kraus, CBS News, London.
Researchers warn that hop yields could fall by as much as 18% across growing regions in Europe by 2050 if farmers don't adapt to the changing climate. Well, tens of thousands of dock workers who run major shipping ports along the east and Gulf coasts, they could walk off the job at midnight, disrupting the national supply chain. Labor negotiations between the Longshoremen's Association Union and the U.S. Maritime Alliance, which represents ships and ports, remains at a standstill. Union members, they are demanding significantly higher wages and a total ban on the automation of cranes, gates, and moving containers in their new contract. Now, New York Governor Kathy Hochul discussed strike preparations today.
It's all about being prepared, and I want to reassure everybody we have been taking countless precautionary steps to speed up the process of unloading these ships and deal with the cargo containers in advance of this. The food supply is secure right now, and we'll certainly be communicating with the public as this unfolds if it takes any length of time.
Now, President Biden has indicated that he won't intervene in any strike, saying that resolving the dispute is a matter of collective bargaining. Well, so to come on Valley News Live for you at 4, the former CEO of Epic Companies is being sued. We'll explain why. Plus, Summer Schnellbach will give us a look at our forecast.